Hello everybody, it's Calxiyn here. If you guys enjoyed this video, you guys should become patrons over on Patreon or join our Discord server. So today, this was actually, I stole this. So somebody in the Murder of Birds Patreon only Discord server asked us who we thought was the best voice actress or voice actor for the volume, I guess. And so I wanted to kind of discuss such with Hunter and I. You know what I mean? And so I thought that was a pretty good idea. So Hunter, in your opinion, or do you want me to go first? Or do you want me to list off, like, characters that other people suggested and then we can rank them?
Well, because I already sort of have an opinion on this.
Okay, so do you want to go ahead?
Because,
really let me just tell you what people said. People said Oscar, Ilya, Hazel, Yang, and Raven. And Crow was also one of those people.
So I thought Raven and Yang's voice acting was especially good. It's just in that last scene they had together. Because
kind of like seeing, I guess, like, Barbara's growth, too. I think that's super interesting. You know what I mean? To see how far Barbara has come, like, as a voice actress, because she wasn't originally, like, a voice actress.
Or an
You know
actress,
what I mean? Or an...
period.
I mean, I would say that she was still, like, an actress. You know what I mean? Like, she did, like, skits and stuff for RT, right?
I guess.
And she was in, whatchamacallit? She was in, what's it called? Days to the Sleep show.
Yeah, but a lot of people were, and they're not necessarily actors.
Yeah, but Barbara was good
Just
in
because,
the
in
the zombie show or whatever.
Does not mean a zombie show? What?
Yeah, the one where everybody couldn't sleep.
Oh, you mean Day 5? Okay,
Yeah,
I
Day
thought you were
5 she
talking
was
about...
really good. Like, I found that, like, that was a very interesting
watched
performance.
that?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, I didn't even know you watched that.
Yeah. You're talk louder. Anyways, so yeah, I think that, like, it's just so interesting to see how far she's come as Yang. And so I definitely agree with you there. But then it's also kind of Raven showing a more emotional capacity, right? Because we've kind of seen her the entire volume, sort of, I don't know how to put this. Like, we've seen her the entire volume have this, I don't want to say the same voice, but the same sort of emotions. But this, she was really put through a lot of different emotions we hadn't seen before, right? And so you're going to say Yang and Raven? Is that your final answer?
Yes, specifically for that. Oscar, I thought
I'm
Oscar
going to give
was
reasoning
meh.
for everything. So, for the reasoning for Oscar, in my opinion, is because he's able to match Ozpin so well. It's because he's able to match Ozpin's way of speaking, even when Ozpin's voice isn't there. Does that make sense? That he's able to, copy he's able to copy Ozpin's way of speaking and Ozpin's mannerisms, and then very much have his own voice as well. So I think that's the reason why a couple of people have said that, because I know somebody said, like, not many people can pull off, like, the second voice, like, inflection coming from the same person, right? And so he's very much studied sort of how Ozpin talks and everything, right? The voice actor, right? And so I think that's pretty interesting, I guess. Like, that's an interesting, because I think you have, like, voices as in, like, I don't know, like, are they, like, Vernal has a very nice voice, you know what I mean? But there's also the acting part in voice acting, and in terms of technique, Oscar has a lot of that.
You know, in terms of acting as, you know, getting across emotions, I feel like Raven was the most interesting, especially in that last scene. Like, that was the best piece of acting.
Yeah, and so I'm
RWBY
saying that, like, because you have, like, how it compels the audience, but you also have, like, stuff in terms of technique, and so I feel like if we're giving, like, technique points, that's where Oscar comes down to, because it's about the actor having to study how the original character Ozpin had talked, right? But moving swiftly onward, so something else that people mentioned is Hazel. Now, if you guys don't know, Hazel actually does the voices for all of the Grimm already.
That same dude.
Yeah, so they're the same guy. I really like Hazel's voice, right? Like, I think that he had a very interesting voice, but the problem I had with Hazel in the very end was that weird robotic thing they did when he had the dust infusion. Like, they put a very interesting effect on his voice, and I understand what they were going for, but it didn't come across that well, in my opinion. But I did really enjoy his, like, nobody has to die today. Like, he has a very, like, deep sort of, like, he has a very compelling voice, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And it's not necessarily that he got across emotion, well, I mean, he did, but that's not necessarily the reason why. It's just that his voice is very good. I don't know. Like, it makes him more likable, right? He has a good voice. Like, what can I say?
He has a deep voice. It characterizes him well.
Yeah, it's good characterization on his part, because we've seen what happens when voices don't match the characters that they're supposed to play. Like, in different types of anime, you know what I mean? Like, if you, like, I don't know.
Is there a particular...
I mean, I'm mostly talking about, like, Jean, in a sense. Like the Jean in the Japanese version compared to Miles.
Oh,
right?
yeah, because Japanese Jean sounds smooth
and then
as shit.
Japanese Sun compared to the Sun that we got, right?
What
and
Japanese
so maybe less than Jean, but Sun in Japanese sounds like a, like, smooth, sultry sort of, like, man that is going to carry me away.
John,
you know what I mean?
Because at least with Sun was, like, confident.
Yeah, and so...
With John, it's like...
Yeah, and so, like...
You lose his nerdiness.
Yeah, and so you kind of have that comparison. I mean, I'll make an argument that the Japanese John sounds better just because he puts on a very, like, fake route of confidence, right, to get to Weiss, but then you hear how his voice changes later when he's not as confident anymore, and so there's a lot of range in the Japanese voice actor's voice, but Miles never sounds genuinely sexy. No offense to Miles. But the Japanese voice actor for John does when he's saying that, like, oh, just dropping in, you know what I mean? Like, it's a very, like, sexy line, and then for the rest of the Japanese sort of thing, you still have, like, a more deeper voice John, but you still know that he doesn't have that confidence before. You see a greater contrast, in my opinion. But with Sun, it's that, and I've talked about this before, but Japanese Sun sounds so sure of himself, you know, in his convictions. But when you listen to American Sun, it sounds like he's asking a question sometimes when he's really, like, saying an answer, if that makes sense. Like, you know, like, he's just like, oh, you know, well, I heard that they're gonna be at the docks, so we should go to the docks then, or whatever his line is relating, to when Blake and him go get Torchwick. Like, it sounds very much like a question rather than assertion, right? And I think Sun works better as a assertive sort of character that has, like, this sort of cheeky side, like how he was like, oh, you know, it's a volunteer gig. Like, that was funny, but it was assertive. You know, at the beginning of Volume 1, he sounds like he's questioning a lot, if that makes sense.
Are you sure you know what assertive means? Because I don't remember that line being assertive.
Like, I guess it's more confidence, but I mean assertive as in, like, that he knows, like, he knows that he's joking, and he's not questioning, you know what I mean? Like, does that make sense?
Because I suppose it was, I guess
because
it was
a joke,
context,
like,
right?
yeah,
because
exactly.
Part of it was also, yeah, okay.
Like, he's like, nah, it's a volunteer gig. Like, that was a very, like, he wasn't, like, hesitant to kind of make that sort of joke with this person that was trying to kill. You know what I mean? Like, it's very, like, Volume 5 Sun is a big improvement from Volume 1 Sun, just because Volume 1 Sun kind of talks as if, like, he doesn't know for sure what he's talking about, and that just doesn't help with his character. But that's what I really, I guess, like about, you know, Hazel always sounds so sure. You know what I mean? Like, nobody had to die today. Like, it characterizes them well, and again, that characterization is important, because as I said, to get into this topic, right, like, some of the RWBY voice actors don't necessarily, like, fit very well with who they're trying to be, especially when you see it in a different language, right? Because at first, like, when you have nothing to compare it to, you can't really consider, like, what it could be, you know what I mean? But when you see somebody else dub it in a different way, you're like, like, that maybe is what it should have been, right? But moving swiftly onward from Hazel, my pick is actually Ilya. Because Ilya...
She was also quite
Ilya
good.
has... First of all, she has an all-star voice actor, right, Jeremy? There weren't any lines that she delivered that I was like, really? You know what I mean? Because with everyone else, they had one line that really, really bothered me, if that makes sense.
Really?
Yeah, so, like, I don't remember, but Raven's voice had always bugged... Don't you remember that I was saying that? That Raven's voice was bothering me at the beginning?
No, because I learned to like Raven's voice.
Yeah.
I just remember her voice sounding different, but then at the same time, she was in a different sort of situation.
Yeah, and so there was something that, like, Raven had said that I was like, that's weird, you know? And there's, like, a couple of things that Oscar had said that I'm like, and then obviously with Hazel, you have that weird effect that he put on his voice when he infused the dust. But there was no line that Ilya's voice actors ever said that seemed like, that I was like, you know, like, because I don't know, like, sometimes, like, you're in such an emotional scene, and then during, like, a bad line, that'll break. You know what I mean? And you're like, like, you almost cringe a little bit. You're like, oh no. Like, that's kind of how I felt, like, when Hazel had that weird effect. I was like, oh, Hazel, you were doing so well. Why did you do this? You know what I mean? Or at the beginning of Volume 1, Yang's like, worry not, little sister. Like, that's a line that I'm like, no, don't do that. You know what I mean? Like, it's a little cringe, but it's okay. And so, like, when you think about it like that, I think that Ilya had no line for me, and again, this is a personal thing, that I was like, that's a little, like, that's cringy, like, please, like, don't do that, because obviously she's a seasoned voice actress, she knows how to make things sound, you know what I mean? And I think that she just, like, I couldn't imagine anybody else with Ilya's character, if that makes sense. Like, Jeremy just, like, characterizes Ilya so well, I can't imagine another voice actor replacing her, you know what I mean? And so, I can't picture that, and I think that if the voice actor fits the role so well that you could never replace them, they are doing a good job, right? And so for me, Crow is like that. I can't imagine somebody replacing Crow's voice actor at this point, because he just plays Crow so well. He is Crow, right? But the thing is that, like, with Raven, I don't think that you could... With Raven and Oscar, I couldn't be like, oh, you know, like, nobody else can play Oscar, it's just him, or no one else can play Raven, because when Raven's voice was bothering me, I gave some suggestions for who I thought could maybe, sound more like I had imagined, in a sense, right? So for Oscar, I'm not like, no one else could play Oscar, like, no one has this thing, but with Ilya and with Hazel, to an extent, I'm like, yeah, no one else could replace this person. And I think that that's how I feel about Yang as well, is that you could never replace Yang. And maybe that's because they're the main four and they're who we started out with, but I'm like, no, you could never replace Yang and have it be the same thing. You know what I mean? And maybe that's because the RWBY girls were supposed to be based off of them.
And now
you know what I mean?
It's been so long.
Yeah, like, Blake was supposed to be, like, a personification of Aaron to an extent.
Even RWBY's voice has changed a lot when you go back to, like,
yeah,
the
and
original.
that's what really annoys me with RWBY's voice, but we don't have to talk about that. Yeah, like, that's a whole other video on RWBY's. Yeah, exactly. That's a whole other video to do. But you understand what I mean, right? Is that these characters were made, like, Monty made Weiss for Kara. He made Aaron for Blake, you know what I mean? Like,
Aaron for Blake. Blake was the real person. Aaron is just a figment of your imagination.
You understand? And so
Aaron
it's hard.
Zyke is my favorite anime
It's hard
character.
to imagine just replacing them. But, like, if they replaced
Superman versus Goku versus Aaron.
If they replaced Sun right now, or they replaced Jean, or even if they replaced Raven, like, I would be like, oh, okay. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't bother me. But if they replaced Ilya, it would bother me. If they replaced Hazel, I mean, Hazel's probably not gonna be a thing. It would bother me. You understand what I mean? And so, you feel me, Hunter? You understand? Mm-hmm. And so that's why I find Ilya sort of the best of the volume, because you have the technique part, you have the characterization part, you have the fact that she never sounded weird part. Like, you know what I mean? Like, with everything we talked about, we sort of had, like, issues with, we had some issues with Oscar, we had some issues with Hazel, or we had, like, I had some issues with Raven, but with Ilya, I have no issues. So, what do you think about that? Because I don't know if you remember some lines where she sounded kind of strange. You know what I mean?
Where Ilya? No, she would always sound very good. I feel like both with Ilya and Blake, as with Yang and Raven, you got a lot of very good emotional performances. Mm-hmm. No, it's all been very good. I know.
Like, it's hard to pick one, but if I had to pick one, it would be Ilya, and then it would be Hazel, and then we'd kind of keep going down the list, right? So yeah, I think that Jeremy has to win for, like, best voice acting skill out of the new characters, right?
Yeah.
But, relatively new, but out of sort of our oldies, right, I think that Yang, or Barbara, did, like, such an amazing performance, and you see how much she's grown, that I have to say that, like, it's so inspiring to see how far that they've come, and so I think that, like, for me, it would be Yang, like, for in terms of the old character performance, and then Ilian, the new character performance, but overall, I still think that I had to say, like, Yang. I think that, you know, like, she had this character before, and she still does, who was very happy and very, like, loving life and everything, and so to have them do such a shift to, like, why would I want her to come back, and sort of being so upset, like, what if I needed her for me, and all the stuff that she said to Raven, like, that's not strength, but I'm strong because when she comes, I'll be ready for it, like, all of those lines, like, it changed, like, you see the change, if that makes sense, you know what I mean, like, you see how amazing it is to see, like, how different a character is, yet how they are so the same. And we haven't been able to see that with Ilia, right? Because Ilia hasn't been around that long, but with Yang, you really see how she's come from the beginning, and now how she's here, and I feel like that's so compelling, and so I would have to say that I think that Yang is my overall favorite.
I would have to go with Yang as well.
Well, I'm glad we sorted that out. So now it's really up to you guys. Like, what do you guys think? Do you think that it's Yang or someone else? Do you agree with the reasons we gave? Or if you don't agree, and if you guys enjoyed this video, you guys should become patrons over on Patreon. Or join our Discord server. And we will see y'all later. Bye, guys!